To order the November 15th meeting of the Montgomery County Election Board, noting the presence of all three members. Commissioner Gale is online, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, our only agenda item today is hearing to consider challenges to provisional ballots cast in the 2023 general election. Do I read the code here?
You can.
Okay, I'll read through it. Pursuant to the Pennsylvania Election Code, the board is required to convene for a hearing to consider all challenges to the decision of the canvass board on provisional ballots. 2 ballots were challenged during the canvass, and we will hear arguments regarding one of those challenges this morning. The board will consider the following challenge to the ballot of Joseph Zulch.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Did he go to the mic? Or does oh yeah, the mic.
Right
Okay.
here. The Democratic Party made a challenge to the initial determination of voter services with respect to Mr. Zelch's ballot here. Mr. Zelch voted provisionally, but our understanding is that he had also signed the poll book, which is evidence that he was an in-person voter. We challenge that because it's, a little suspicious or suspect. How did a voter complete all of the mechanical requirements of filling out a provisional ballot, getting it in, having it handed to them by the election officials at that precinct, put it in the secrecy envelope, have all the right signatures on the outside? Our understanding is the only problem is that Mr. Zelch had signed the poll book. Based on that as evidence that he had voted in person, the voter services office made the determination that his provisional ballot should not count, such that no one's allowed to vote more than once. We only want 1 ballot vote per voter counting. We objected to that for the opportunity to dig in a little bit more. Of course, we believe that every voter has the right to vote. All valid votes must count, and everyone should only vote once. We believe that Mr. Zelch's provisional ballot is the only vote that he has cast in the 2023 municipal election. Since the opportunity to object to provisional ballot determinations, the Voter Services Office has done some digging. They've reached out to the voter. They've reached out to the judge of elections. One of the inspectors at the precinct in Marlborough Township has weighed in. The voter, Mr. Zelch, has provided voter services with a statement that I'm happy to share a copy with members of the board and sort of offer in a consideration for this objection. And I can walk you through that. I can approach as appropriate. The email to voter services from Mr. Zelch in response to voter services inquiry. So we don't believe there's any authenticity issues here. This is not an unsolicited communication. It was at the request of voter services. Mr. Zelch responds and explains that he was one of the voters who had a defect with his mail-in ballot. And there was some reason, he needed to note, he received notice and needed an opportunity to cure his mail-in ballot, which was not going to count based on the way it was turned into voter services. So what Mr. Zelch did on the instruction of the Voter Services Office is go to his polling place and ask to vote provisionally. When he did that, he described some confusion that immediately happened as he walked into the polling place. One person had him talk to another person. Throughout this process, he did end up signing the poll book, but he explains that he went in asking to vote provisionally, was ultimately given a provisional ballot, and then believed his vote would count through the provisional ballot. He did not vote in person and did not believe his mail-in ballot would count. So that is Mr. Zelch's statement here. That's actually corroborated by statements from the judge of elections and one of the inspectors, which I can also approach and provide. At the bottom of this chain, members of the board, you will see that the judge of elections doesn't recall much going on, but has no reason to doubt Mr. Zelch's statement. Then asks the inspectors at this precinct in Marlborough Township to weigh in. What we find is that one of the inspectors states that one of the inspectors essentially corroborates Mr. Zelch's story, says that I asked the judge of elections to help him handle this situation. Reminds the judge of elections had Mr. Zelch sign the poll book, had him switch ballots to make sure he got the right provisional ballot, so he was vote on the ballot he was supposed to vote on. It all checks out. And the inspector, Cindy Basket, also describes that we did have a 1-vote discrepancy in the number of ballots that were torn off and handed to voters and the number of votes that were actually cast on the machine. There's a 1-vote discrepancy. That discrepancy is Mr. Zelch signing the poll book, but only voting provisionally and not casting an in-person vote. We think all of this information in totality corroborates that this provisional ballot is the only vote that Mr. Zelch has cast in this election. And we object to the determination that it should not count. And we ask that, taking all of this into consideration, the board should vote to count Mr. Zelch's ballot. Happy to answer any questions. I also have a copy of the general return from this precinct, which contains the note, "A person left the voting area with 1 ballot." So this was a known issue explaining a 1-vote discrepancy on election night as before it was returned to voter services. I can also share this. I only have 1 copy of this. This is helpful as the board considers all of this evidence in totality.
I have a few more if you want to.
Tim, so the email that was sent by the voter on November 14th references that he had received an email from I guess the county voter service department. There's no dispute that email was sent to him, the one that was indicating that the ballot was not going to be counted, the absentee ballot.
I'm not aware of any dispute. Mr. Marlatt is able to make representations on behalf of the county.
It wasn't attached. I'm just wondering if there's any.
Yeah, I would not dispute that.
Okay.
And in such a situation, one of the only ways you can cure your mail-in ballot that's not going to count is to go vote provisionally. That is an instruction that we know that the county gives to a voter in this situation.
Right. But I think it lends credibility to the fact that he was notified he couldn't vote, or that the absentee wasn't going to be counted. It wasn't like he just showed up there without that. And it looks like he provided it to the folks that are polling locations. So it's okay.
And as the board knows, the law in this area, 25 PS section 3050, states that provisional ballots shall count. That's mandatory, not directory, unless one of certain circumstances is provided. One of those circumstances is if the county has confirmed that no other ballot's been cast. That's the language with which you're operating here. And we believe that signing of the poll book is just evidence. And in this situation, we were fortunate enough to gather enough evidence to show that only 1 vote is being cast for Mr. Zelch, and that's this provisional ballot.
Mr. Marlatt?
Yeah. I think the only thing I would add to this is I don't generally have any objection to any of the arguments that Mr. Ford is making. It is apparent from a review of the the Shore database that Mr. Zelch did indeed receive a mail-in ballot to vote, that ballot was not counted and that he was awarded credit for voting in person at the polls on election day. You've seen the emails that he has the the evidence of what occurred at the polls according to the voter himself and according to some of the poll workers that are there. I believe the code here, section 3050, has been accurately represented, that if the board determines that they did not vote in any other way, that the ballot can count. I think the only other thing I would add is it's a long-standing precedent in case law that the code should be construed liberally, so that we're leaning towards counting votes where we have evidence that those votes should be counted. The only thing I would say is that it's the ultimate determination today of the board as to whether you feel there is sufficient evidence before you to include this ballot in the count for the election.
All right. Do we have any public comment on this matter? All right, hearing none, I'm going to make a motion to count the provisional ballot of Joseph Zolt. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Judge Clifford. Any board comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. Are there any negative votes? All right, ballot will be cast. Do we have any closing board comments? Hearing none, I'll make a motion to adjourn the November 15th, 2023 meeting in the Montgomery County Board of Elections. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Judge Clifford. Any board comment? Hearing none, we'll move on to a vote. Any negative votes? Meeting is adjourned.